In this tutorial, we're going to use InDesign CC 2020 to go through Classroom in a Book Chapter 10, which is all about importing and modifying different types of graphics. This will really help you a lot with how to best work with all those images you're going to be putting into your different publications. It is kind of a weird looking end result, but it is worth it. It's actually better than it used to be. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Let's go into InDesign, go our File, Open, and let's go find that Chapter 10 Start file and say Open. Do not update the links right now because we want to practice a few things. Do File, Save As. Let's come down and do first initial last name, underscore, InDesign, Classroom in a Book, Chapter, what are we on, 10? And make sure I'm in my Lesson 10 folder and say Save. Alright, so as we are working with different types of graphics, let's go ahead and make sure we're all on the same workspace. Let's go Window, let's go Workspace, and I'm going to reset my advanced workspace. I'm going to try. There we go. I have my advanced workspace sitting here. So there are things you have to think about when you're working with different types of graphics. Some are bitmap, some are vector. We're going to have a whole lesson on that, telling between what's a pixel and what is a vector image. So if you're working with things like Illustrator, you're usually working with some type of vector image, which means it's scalable in a mathematical way, whereas if you're working with Photoshop, you're working with something that's based on pixels that do not scale quite as well, but sometimes have better quality for more complex colors. Alright, so let's go ahead and get a start on looking at our panels and our panel options. So let's go Window and Links. Window and links is one you're going to be using quite a bit. So the links will tell us, you can actually scale it to make it a little bit bigger, exactly what the name of your images are. It will tell you what type they are. With this one, the title, we can tell it's on the pasteboard and we have it on page 1, so it gives us a really good idea what's in those different types of elements. General note on link file names. I always go through and make them much smaller if possible, especially if you download something and it's got one of those XYZ PDQ at the end of the world type of names, because when we package, we only get 255 characters, and that has to be within all the folders that are within folders. So in general, just get in the habit of renaming those to make your life a little bit easier. Let's look at what all the other options are here. It tells us how many links we have, and we can go down to the link info. So if I click on that, it's going to give me all kinds of information about that image, when it was taken, where is it at in our publication right now, when did we modify it last, when did we create it. So a lot of this gives me a really good information about how and where we're using those different types of images. Then we have things like here, the relink button from CC Libraries. CC Libraries is maybe you have this stored in maybe it's a logo for a company or using it all the time. So there it might be a library. Here is your relink. So it will relink all the missing links. So if there's a problem and maybe you changed the name of a folder, maybe you had to move something around, as long as all your images are in one folder, it will relink and make your life a lot easier. Here we have go to link, so I can actually go ahead and say I want to find this link. On this RR logo, if I do go to link, it's going to go ahead and take me right to where that is. So that can be really, really helpful. Update link. So maybe you've changed it. That's what this little exclamation point is telling us, that it's been modified since we looked at it last, so we would need to update that link. And maybe we want to be able to go through and edit the original. So you'll find that a lot of times you're bringing in images, they'll be too low on the resolution. So we need to go through and play with some of those. So that is where you're going to get that information. Now what I do want you to do is go here to the panel options in your hamburger menu. And you're going to get what type of other things do you want. I want you to also turn on actual PPI and effective PPI and say OK. So actual PPI will tell us how many points per inch are in what we're creating. For almost everything you do for the class, we're doing it for print, so we want that to be 300. This effective PPI lets me know if you have used it in a way that wasn't necessarily the right size. So say you're taking a 2-inch by 3-inch image and trying to use it for your cover, this number is going to be really, really low because you're distorting it a whole bunch. If you get a number by another number, it means you've messed with the proportions, which is something you don't want to do either. So before you turn things in, especially your publications, I want you to go through. AI is not going to have this number because those are vector graphics, but all the others we would want to go through and up to 300. So let's go ahead and do that right now while we're thinking about it. So this Milky Way is 150 right now, but we can tell that we're using it. Well, it's page 5. Let's go ahead and take this down a little bit. You can tell we're using that image to be pretty big. So let's go view and show our rulers. So we can tell that this image is about 11-ish inches. So we would want to go ahead and make sure that this image is going to fit better. So I'm going to go ahead and do my edit with, or edit original. And that's going to pop open my Photoshop. So I've got my Photoshop here. I'm going to go to my image size. And let's see what we know about this image. We know that this image is actually 6 inches by 4 inches and the resolution is 140. So we know that this is actually a pretty tiny image compared to how we are going to be using it later. So for purposes of just getting in practice, for the width, let's go ahead and change that width up to, let's say 12. So it's going to make our height the same. Let's push more as far as pixels go into our resolution. And you can see what happens with our reduced noise. You kind of play with that. And preserve details 2.0. So let's go ahead and say OK. Now it will go ahead, once we save it, it will tell InDesign this has been modified, has been changed. So it's going to go ahead, it's going to make it much, much bigger since we're using it so much bigger. Let's do Control S and save that and close it down. And I'm going to minimize my thing here. So now if I look at my Milky Way, I can tell that my resolution is 300 and it's a little bit bigger. So 333, the image is a little bit bigger than what I'm using it as. So you want to get in the habit of going through and double checking those columns before you turn anything in. So it's just something we got to kind of keep in mind as we move forward, because you will end up losing points there along the way. All right, so let's go ahead and jump into what the book wants us to go through. And let's update some of these revised graphics. So let's go to our pages. Let's go ahead and go to this page 1 and look at this title.ai, this Songs of the Garden. I'm going to Control plus and zoom in a little bit. So we can tell if we look at our links that that has been changed. If I go ahead and double click, it will go ahead and give me the updated version, but it also looks really crappy. So let's go ahead all together and do View, Display Performance, and change it to High Quality. If you find your computer's running really slow, change it back to the typical. It will make it run just a little bit faster when you're working on some of these documents, especially as they get bigger. All right, so now let's go ahead and look at our butterfly. Select that one. And let's come over here and do another way. Let's go ahead and do Update Link. So it's going to go in and fix that one link. Now, if we look at this AI logo, let's go and hit the number. We can tell it's been modified as well. If we go ahead and say relink, it's going to say, okay, where is the link? What do you want to link it to? So I can tell it's that Ricky Records RR logo. So I'm going to look at RR logo here, and I can tell it's .ai, and I'm going to do open. And it's going to go ahead and fix that for us as well. So if that was in the same folder, it would have fixed this cherries at the same time. Because it's in a different one, it didn't. So let's go ahead and double click and update all of those. So you never want to have any of those type of errors as you're working and going forward. All right. Now let's go ahead and maybe we decided we don't like this pink flower. Maybe we want to make it something else. So let's go ahead and go to our relink. And instead, we're going to go back a folder. We're going to make it the pink flower PSD instead. So cover pink flower PSD. So instead of having to go back and replace and do everything, we can just relink it and put a new image in pretty easily. It's going to go ahead and scale it and do everything we need to do. Alright, so we just played with our display quality. If you wanted to just fix the display for just one, you can do a right-click display quality and change it for just one image if you don't want to do the whole thing. Alright, so now let's go ahead and figure out how to import and size graphics. Let's go ahead and go to page 5, which is actually on this side over here. And let's look at our layers panel. You'll see in our layers panel we've got background photos, graphics, photos, and text. So we want to make sure as you're working that you get in the habit of putting things on the right layer. So let's go ahead and make sure that we are on that photos layer. So we know we're on photos because it's got the pen. Here's where we are. So I'm going to go make sure I don't have anything selected. Let's go ahead and go File, Place. And let's go grab this blue hydrangea.psd and say Open. So as we've talked before, we've got quite a few ways of importing something. If I were just to click, I can see that's pretty big. So I can do a few different things. So we're just going to go ahead and click, put it in there. Let's go ahead, grab our selection tool, make sure just this one is selected. And let's do Shift and Control. And that will change the size of the frame and the size of the graphic at the same time. So let's go ahead and make it just a little bit smaller. Now what we want to do is, with our selection tool, just grab the outside. If you accidentally grab the inside and grab the content, you will just move the inside and not the frame. And students do that all the time. They'll grab that content grabber, the donut, instead of the actual frame. Alright, so I'm going to grab my frame, and I'm going to go ahead and bring it down until I get to that little guide that's going to pop up. This says now you are aligned with the top. We see that green line, and if I go in or out, it should give me a guide for the other frame that's here as well. So you want to go ahead and use those frames, and if you do get out a little bit, you can always nudge it with your arrows. Depends on your mouse. Alright, so go ahead and got that in there. So maybe we want to make it so the leaves are no longer. We just want to see the hydrangea in here. So let's go ahead and click on our content grabber. Alright, so I'm going to click out, I'm going to click back in, I've got my content grabber, and you'll see if we hit Alt and Shift at the same time and pull, that is going to pull the image inside the frame without actually adjusting the size of the frame itself. So we can tell that it's much, much larger. You can use your arrows to nudge that back and forth until you get the placement where you want it. And I think I'm pretty happy with it, so let's go ahead and click out and do a Control-S to save. Alright, so let's go to this empty frame right here. We're going to go ahead and we are creating this collage right here. So we've just done the hydrangea, now we're going to do the sunflower. So let's go ahead and do our we're going to do our file place, but we're going to do it a little bit differently. We're going to click on that empty frame, we're going to go File and Place, and we want to go ahead and grab that sunflower and open. And we're going to find it's way, way, way too big for the area that it's in. So if we do that content grabber and do a Control minus, you can see just how big by that blue that image is compared to the spot we're trying to put it in, which is a bit of a problem. So we want to make sure that we are paying attention to how we're going to fit things in. So let's go ahead and go to Object, and let's come down to Fitting, and let's do Fit Content to Frame. So we're just saying make it work, put it in there. Now the problem with Fit Content to Frame, oh, you see that because we had the other, it made it big. So let's undo. I'm going to make sure I just have my frame selected, and then I'm going to go to Object, Fitting, Fit Object to Frame, or Fit to Frame, Fit Frame to Content. There we go. So undo. It did exactly what it was supposed to do. It made it actually bigger. I am telling you the wrong thing. We want to go ahead and under Object, under Fitting, we want it to tell it to fit it to the frame we actually have. So now when we do it, we see it's not lovely, but it is a little bit out of proportion. You can tell you've got some funhouse stuff going on. So there are some other ways you can use the fitting. So let's try Object and Fitting. And instead, let's try Fill Frame Proportionally. So it's going to go ahead and it's proportioned, but now I can't actually see my thing. I'm going to do a right click in a fitting, and instead I'm going to do a Content Aware Fit, which is going to go ahead and move that sunflower into the center point for me because it's guessing what you think, what you are going to guess is what you want the main thing in that image. All right, so go ahead and click out. Let's click on our circle and add our calla lily. So let's go File, Place. You always want to place your images. You do not want to copy them in. You always want to keep them as a separate thing. You will lose points if you do copy and paste. I'm always looking for those linked files. All right, so we know that's not quite how we want it, so let's do a right click, fitting, and try that Content Aware Fitting again. So you'll see that it scaled it and it moved it over. So we're actually seeing the whole thing and we have everything we want, which is awesome. All right, so what's another way to import? Maybe you want to be able to drag those images in. So let's go to our File Explorer. All right, let's go ahead and go to our File Explorer. I'm in Lesson 10, and I want to go ahead and grab that star flower. And what I can do, move this over, is make sure that I have everything's deselected. I'm going to grab this star flower. I'm going to go ahead and just bring it over from my Windows Explorer over that frame. And it's going to automatically go into that frame. In proportion, it's going to be exactly what I want. But I can see my frame is a little bit too big, so let's do an Object. Let's come down here to Fitting. And let's go to our Object Fitting. We want to do the Fit the Frame to the Content. So we want to go ahead and make that frame a little bit smaller. So another way we can bring some images in is to use Bridge. And if you don't have Bridge installed, push pause and go download Bridge because it will make your life a lot easier. When we work with Bridge, it gives us a lot of options to see things that we don't necessarily see in our standard Windows Explorer type of mode. So let's go ahead and click on, all right, we've got everything deselected. So let's go ahead and go File and Browse in Bridge. And it's automatically, Bridge is going to automatically open the folder that we are in that has all of your images so far. So that part's very nice. You don't have to go looking around for it. So in Bridge, we also get a lot of that extra data, the metadata. This is where that stuff that's showing up in our links panel is coming from. You can also change the size. So you can make it really big, really small. So maybe you're trying to get just the right picture but don't want to open up all of them. We can also do things like rename our items here. So let's go ahead and click on that maple leaf. I'm going to click down here in the name of the maple leaf and let's call it Maple Leaf Yellow. So as I was telling you, you need to change the names of really long links. This is a really good and easy way to go ahead and do that, is to use that Bridge. All right, so now we want to make Bridge just a little bit smaller. If you have dual monitors, this makes it much easier because you can work back and forth that way. So let's go ahead and grab our Maple Leaf Yellow. I'm going to go ahead and screw these down, make it bigger, make this a little bit smaller. Okay, make it small. All right, I'm going to grab that Maple Leaf Yellow. And I want to go ahead and drag it into an open area on my pasteboard by the square. And we're going to go ahead and make it full size. Undo. I don't know why it did it that little. All right, so let's do it right here. All right, so Control plus, zoom in. All right, so that's way too big and it's not what I want. So let's go ahead and make sure we edit it. Let's make it a little bit smaller. So let's grab that content grabber. So we're hitting just the middle of it. And let's go ahead and go to our reference point. So let's go to our properties. So Window and Open Properties. And it's going to give us, here's our linked file. We want to do it from the middle, so we're going to scale it from the middle. And we want to transform it a little bit and tip it. So let's go ahead on our grab here and grab our shift and bring that in a little bit. So I'm going to bring it up. Now undo. Didn't work the way I wanted to because I grabbed the wrong element. So I'm going to go ahead and do Control and Shift as I shrink this, so it's going to do both at once. All right, I'm going to bring that up here so it kind of sitting inside, and I want to rotate it about 20 degrees over in my Properties panel. All right, so I want to go ahead and do a click on my box and do a right click, and I want to fit the frame to that content. So it's going to be nice and small now. So now I can decide, what if I hate that image? I can go back into Bridge and I can go, okay, let's try this red maple leaf instead. And because we are going to take it straight into that box, which has already been scaled and everything, it's going to apply all the same changes for us. So it makes it a lot easier to change things in and out without having to go through and transform and change and move things around all the time. So it's a great way to try things out. So let's go ahead and do a deselect all on our pasteboard and do a Control S to save. All right, so we just talked about how to fix things. Let's go ahead and go to our links. Let's look at that blue hydrangea and let's click on the page number, and it's going to go ahead and take us to where that page number is. And let's go ahead and try that Edit Original again. So let's grab that Edit Original. It's going to open up in Photoshop. Here's where I would go through and do my image size. I would want to make sure it's 300 dpi and say OK. All right, and let's make some other change to it. So let's go ahead and do a filter. So let's go here to our filter gallery and pop that open in here. And let's go ahead and try something. So pick any type of filter that you like. Maybe I'm going to make it into a watercolor. We'll make it really obvious. Neon glow. That's pretty ugly. Let's do that. All right, so I'm going to do Control S and save. And now that I'm going to close it. Now that I have gone through and changed that, you're going to see that it's going to give me that updated, modified link right there. So it's pretty easy to go ahead and play with those elements without having to move in and out of all the different programs all the time. So let's go ahead and play with a few other things. So let's work with a few different types of backgrounds. For some things, if they're in what's called a clipping path, they're going to have a really defined background, and some will have more of a transparent that makes it a little bit easier to lay it onto other photos. Let's go ahead and navigate to page 4. So page 4 is over here. It's got the cherry blossoms and this purple square on it. Let's do our layers panel and make sure we're putting things in on our photos layer. And let's go ahead and lock that background just in case to make it a little bit easier so we don't grab something that we don't want to grab. And let's go File and Place and go ahead and grab that pairs.psd. So pairs.psd and open. And I'm going to go ahead and kind of just put it right here or so. All right, so those are some pretty ugly pairs. That's okay. I'm going to close my layers panel for now. And let's go ahead and take a peek at what these pairs actually are. So these pairs have been prepped in Photoshop to have what's called a clipping path. So let's go to Object. Let's come down here to Clipping Path. And let's go Options. So we want to go ahead and make sure Preview is turned on. And go ahead and say Photoshop Path. So it's going to automatically show us what has been done to those pairs. So we like those two pairs. We're going to go ahead and keep them and say OK. Now we want to Object, Fitting. We want to go ahead and do Fit Frame to Content. So we're making the frame a little bit smaller now that we've cut part of that out. And let's go ahead and grab our selection tool. And let's do a Shift Control and make those a little bit smaller. Remember, Shift Control is going to make it so we can move things a little bit easier. It's grabbing the wrong one, so I'm going to do Control Z a couple times, click out, click just my selection tool, Shift Control, and make them a little bit smaller. Alright, now let's go ahead and move them with our selection tool here to kind of the bottom of that box. Alright, so now we want to add more pairs, because who doesn't need more pairs? Let's go ahead and hit Alt and grab and drag another copy up. So this time I only want part of the pairs. So we're going to go ahead and go to Object, come down here to Clipping Path, we want Options, and this time instead of 2 pairs, let's go ahead and grab Right Pair and say OK. So it's already been clipped to make those separate. Let's do our right click and our fitting and our fit frame to content, and now we have one single pair, and he's a little bit big, so let's grab our transform and make him a little bit smaller. So we can go ahead and grab it on the corner and let's go Shift and Control, grab both at the same time. Oh, let's make sure we're on selection tool. Grab the frame, Shift Control, and let's make that smaller. So if you notice over in your properties panel where it says 65, 68, kind of gives you an idea of how much you're scaling it. We want it to be about 80%. So let's go ahead and grab that and move our pair down over here. So now we want to add one more pair because we need more pairs. Let's grab this one and do an Alt and drag again. And this time we want to change to a different pair. So let's go to our Object, come down here to Clipping Path, Options. Instead of right pair, we want left pair and say OK. And you're going to say, but I can't see anything, and that is all right. We're going to go ahead and fix it. Let's do a right click, Fitting. We want Fit Frame to Content, and now we get that right pair or the left pair back, which is what we want. And let's go ahead and scale him a little bit. So we've got our selection tool. Make sure you have your selection on here. We're at 100% right now. Let's go ahead and make it 75%. So you've got quite a few different options as far as transforming and move things around. Let's go ahead and put our other pair right in here. Not sure why you'd want to buy a CD with pairs, but you do. All right, let's do a Control S and save. And let's go ahead and go to the far left side where we've got these other types of rectangles in here. And we're going to go ahead and play with a few other things. So let's take a look at the end one and see what we've got on that page. So right now we can see that we've done the pairs. We're going to go through and work on this section now. And I'm going to go ahead and break this into 2 parts before we start this one. So I'm going to go ahead and pause the recording on this one.